After discovering that his former cleaning lady was living on the streets with her twin daughters, a billionaire left them a cabin in the middle of nowhere. But when they opened the door, all of them were frozen by what they found inside. The sun had not yet risen when Michael Williams, 60 years old, left his penthouse on the Upper East Side. Autumn in New York arrived with a biting chill that made people huddle into their expensive coats, rushing along the still, dark streets. Michael, however, had maintained the same unaltered routine for weeks. Wake up before dawn, put on one of his impeccably tailored Italian suits, and instruct James and his driver of 2 decades to follow the usual route. The armored Mercedes glided silently through the deserted streets, its darkened windows hiding the passenger who, at 62, carried the weight of a guilt that refused to lessen. His time-worn, responsible face was reflected in the glass, merging with the city lights that began to awaken. "Same position as yesterday, James," Michael murmured, his eyes fixed on a specific spot in Central Park. The driver, accustomed to his boss's recent eccentricities, simply nodded, parking discreetly under the shade of a century-old oak. There, on the same bench as always, Sarah Johnson slept. Her thin body served as a shield for her 4-year-old twin daughters, Lucy and Emily. The thin blanket covering them barely offered any protection against the growing autumn chill. Michael watched how Sarah, even asleep, kept her arms tightly around the girls, as if she feared someone might tear them away from her during the night. Memories hit him with renewed force. Sarah, at 25, newly hired as a cleaner in his company, always with a shy yet determined smile. The twins, still babies, occasionally visiting their mother during work hours, filling the austere corridors with their innocent laughter. Then the problems began. Frequent lateness, unexplained absences, mumbled excuses about emergencies with the children. "Sir," James's voice interrupted his reflections, "I found the information you requested regarding the property on Maple Street." Michael took the offered folder, his fingers brushing over neatly organized documents. Blueprints, evaluations, property records, all indicated that the abandoned plot could be acquired quickly, for the right price. "Call Johnson in legal tie," he instructed, without taking his eyes off the bench where Sarah was beginning to stir. "I want the papers ready by the end of the day." The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of silent, calculated activity. Michael spent his mornings observing, his afternoons planning, and his nights reliving old conversations with Margaret, his late wife. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Michael," she used to say, her blue eyes shining with a wisdom he was only just beginning to understand. Margaret had always insisted on maintaining an assistance fund for employees in difficulty, something he had allowed more to please her than because he truly believed in the initiative. After her death 5 years ago, the fund had quietly been discontinued, along with several other employee support policies. Construction of the cabin began on a cloudy October day. Michael personally selected every detail: quality wood for the walls, top-notch thermal insulation, windows that would keep the heat in winter and the cool air in summer. The design was modest but functional. 2 cozy bedrooms, a living room connected to a compact kitchen, a bathroom with hot water, and a basement that could serve as a shelter in emergencies. Each morning, before heading to the office, he supervised the progress. The workers, generously paid for their discretion, asked no questions about the billionaire who insisted on personally inspecting every detail of the small construction. "The outlets need to be higher," he instructed one day, remembering the twins. "And I want protective bars on all the windows on the 2nd floor." As the cabin took shape, Michael found himself imagining scenes he had never witnessed. Sarah preparing breakfast in a safe, clean kitchen, the twins doing their homework at the table, laughter echoing through the heated rooms. It was a dangerous fantasy, he knew. There was no guarantee they would find the cabin, or that they would choose to stay if they did. One afternoon, while supervising the installation of furniture, all carefully chosen to be durable and comfortable without looking too expensive, Michael found an old photograph in his wallet. It was from a company Christmas party years ago. Sarah was there, younger and stronger, with the newborn twins in her arms. Margaret stood by her side, smiling that smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "You were right, my love," he murmured to the photo. "As always." The furniture was completed with meticulous attention to detail. Beds with firm yet cozy mattresses, sturdy dressers for storing clothes, a small bookshelf that could hold children's books. In the kitchen, Michael insisted on stocking the cabinets with non-perishable food, cleaning products, and even basic school supplies for the girls. Nothing too new, he instructed the decor team. It should look used, but well taken care of. As if it's been waiting for them. The finishing touch was a small garden in the backyard. Michael remembered Sarah mentioning once that she dreamed of growing a garden. Now, raised beds waited for seeds, and a small collection of gardening tools rested in a protected cabinet. On the last night before declaring the project complete, Michael stayed alone in the cabin. Dusk light filtered through the windows, creating dancing shadows on the freshly painted walls. His footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor as he made one final inspection. In the larger bedroom, a double bed awaited Sarah, with clean sheets and a thick blanket for cold nights. In the adjacent room, two identical twin beds were positioned beneath the window, each with its own bedside lamp. Michael could almost see Lucy and Emily choosing their sides, fighting and laughing as children should. In the kitchen, his fingers traced the smooth surface of the dining table. 4 chairs surrounded it, 3 for the family and 1 extra. For visitors, he told himself, ignoring the tightness in his chest as he imagined himself sitting there, sharing a meal with them. The envelope in his pocket felt as heavy as lead. Inside was a carefully written letter, addressed to the owner of a small nearby shop. The message was clear. A job opening was to be offered to Sarah Johnson, with flexible hours to accommodate her responsibilities as a single mother. The salary would be discreetly subsidized, ensuring she could support her family with dignity. It was manipulation, he knew, another attempt to control circumstances, to shape fate according to his will. But this time, he thought, it was for a greater good. In the trunk of his Mercedes awaited one last surprise: 3 new winter coats, carefully selected to look used but in good condition. At some point in the coming weeks, when the cold became more intense, they would miraculously appear along Sarah and the girls' daily path. Before locking the cabin door for the last time, Michael spent a few moments in the small basement. The thick walls and independent heating system would guarantee protection even in the worst storms. In one corner, a discreet box contained emergency supplies: flashlights, batteries, extra blankets, a small battery-powered radio. Excessive worry, perhaps, but years in the business world had taught him always to prepare for the worst. Back in the car, Michael found James waiting patiently as always. The sky had gone completely dark, and the first stars were starting to appear over New York. "Home, James," he instructed, allowing himself one last look at the cabin. In the darkness, it looked smaller, more vulnerable, but also more real, more alive, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. In his Italian leather briefcase, between billion-dollar contracts and quarterly reports, rested one last document: the deed to the land ready to be transferred when the time was right. It was his last act of control, he thought wryly. After that, everything would depend on fate and on Sarah. As the Mercedes slid silently through the New York night, Michael allowed himself a moment of reflection. Tomorrow, he would return to his routine of corporate meetings and decisions that affected thousands of lives. He would remain the discreet billionaire who had built an empire through firm and sometimes ruthless decisions. But something had changed. For the first time in a long while, he felt he was doing something Margaret would have approved of. Something that, perhaps, began to balance the scale of his past actions. Somewhere in the city, 3 hearts beat in unison on a park bench, unaware of the change that awaited them, and on a quiet street, a small cabin waited patiently, ready to transform from structure into home, from project into redemption. Michael closed his eyes, letting the gentle movement of the car lull him. Tomorrow would be another day. Tomorrow, perhaps, 3 lives would begin to change, and with them silently his own. Night fell over New York, covering the city with its starry cloak. Somewhere between skyscrapers and shadows, between power and poverty, between past and future. A small miracle was about to happen, and it all began with a look, a memory, and the belated courage to do the right thing. Night fell over New York like an icy blanket. Sarah Johnson clutched Emily against her chest, feeling the heat of her fever through the thin coat covering them. The 4-year-old trembled in her arms, her flushed face pressed against her neck, while Lucy walked by her side, clinging to the hem of her coat. "Mommy," Emily whispered, her voice weak and raspy. "I'm cold." Sarah bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. The shelter was full that night, just like all the others, and the thought of taking Emily, feverish, into that unsanitary environment made her heart clench. Lucy, always the stronger of the two, looked at her sister with worried, dark eyes. "It'll be all right, my love," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to her daughters. "We'll find some place to rest." They were walking along Maple Street, their usual route, when Sarah noticed something different. A gentle light emanated from a building she didn't recall seeing before, or maybe she had never really paid attention. It was a cabin, modest yet well-built, with a welcoming porch and windows glowing like beacons in the darkness. Lucy was the first to point. "Mommy, look! There's a light!" Sarah hesitated. Years on the streets had taught her to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. But Emily was burning with fever, and November's biting wind showed no sign of letting up. With cautious steps, she approached the cabin. The light came from an outside fixture, as if awaiting visitors. The little garden, though somewhat neglected, had an inviting feel. Sarah climbed the porch steps, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hand trembled as she touched the doorknob. To her surprise, it was unlocked. She pushed gently, prepared to find signs of occupation or danger, but what she saw took her breath away. The interior of the cabin was immaculate. A modest yet cozy living room opened before them, with a sofa that looked infinitely more comfortable than any park bench. A small fireplace waited to be lit, with neatly stacked firewood beside it. "Is anyone home?" Sarah called out, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. No answer. Lucy, always the more adventurous, had already let go of her hand, exploring the place with wide eyes of wonder. "Mommy, there's a kitchen, and look, there's food." Sarah followed her daughter into the compact but well-equipped kitchen. The cabinets, when opened, revealed cans of soup, packages of pasta, cereal, all organized as if they were waiting for them. A small refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner, and opening it, Sarah found milk, eggs, and other basic necessities. Emily coughed in her arms, pulling her back to the immediate reality. Making a quick decision, Sarah shut the cabin door and locked it. Whether this was a dream or a trap, she would deal with the consequences later. Right now, her daughter needed warmth and comfort. The bathroom was another surprise, clean, functional, with hot water flowing from the faucets. Sarah nearly cried as she gave Emily a warm bath, dressing her in clean clothes she found in one of the dressers. Meanwhile, Lucy had discovered the children's bedroom, with 2 identical twin beds, each with its own colorful bedside lamp. "Can I lie down here, Mommy, please?" Lucy begged, already climbing into one of the beds. Sarah hesitated only for a moment before nodding. Emily was already half asleep in her arms, the fever beginning to subside thanks to the warm bath and the medicine Sarah had found in the bathroom cabinet. Gently, she laid the little one in the other bed, covering her with a soft blanket that smelled of lavender. While the girls slept, Sarah explored the rest of the cabin. Each discovery left her more perplexed. A well-organized basement with emergency supplies, a small study area stocked with school materials, even a backyard space that seemed prepared for a garden. Sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of hot tea in her hands, the first in so long she could hardly remember, Sarah tried to make sense of it all. Her rational mind told her it was dangerous, that nothing so good came without a price. But there was something else, a deep sense of peace she couldn't explain. The early hours of the morning passed slowly. Sarah checked on Emily regularly, relieved to see her fever dropping and her breathing becoming more regular. Lucy slept soundly, a small smile on her lips as though having the best dream of her life. When the sun began to rise, casting the first rays through the cabin windows, Sarah realized she had made up her mind. She didn't know who had prepared this place or why. She didn't know how long they could stay or what price they might eventually have to pay. But looking at her daughters sleeping peacefully, for the first time in 2 years, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Hope. Emily woke first, her sleepy eyes opening to a brand new day. The fever was gone, leaving only a slight flush in her cheeks. "Mommy," she called, her voice already stronger. "Where are we?" Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking her daughter's dark hair. "In a safe place, my love, home." Lucy, awakened by the voices, jumped out of her bed and ran to hug her sister. "Emily, you won't believe it. We have our own room, and there are toys. And Mommy made hot chocolate." The girls laughed together, a sound Sarah hadn't heard in so long it made her heart ache. Emily, now stronger, sat up and asked to explore the house with her sister. Lucy, assuming the role of tour guide, began showing her all the wonders she had discovered the night before. Sarah watched her daughters running through the house, their laughter echoing off the walls like music. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating every corner of what, inexplicably, was already beginning to feel like home. In the kitchen, she prepared a simple breakfast: eggs, toast, warm milk. The girls sat at the table, their legs swinging on the chairs, chatting excitedly about everything they wanted to do in this house. Lucy was already planning to decorate her side of the room, while Emily dreamed of all the books they could read together on the sofa. Sarah allowed herself to be immersed in the normalcy of the moment, the sound of utensils, the smell of coffee, the warmth of the sun streaming through the kitchen window. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders, letting her breathe fully for the first time in years. But the worries were still there, lurking in the corners of her mind. Who had prepared this place? Why? And most importantly, how long could they stay? The thought of returning to the streets, of seeing the disappointment in her daughter's eyes, was almost unbearable. While washing the breakfast dishes, Sarah noticed a white envelope on the kitchen counter, something she hadn't seen the night before. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside, she found a key and a simple note: "For anyone in need of a fresh start, stay as long as necessary." The tears she had held back for so long finally began to fall. Lucy and Emily, noticing their mother's silent crying, ran to hug her. "Why are you crying, Mommy?" Lucy asked, her big eyes full of concern. Sarah held her daughters tightly, feeling their small hearts beating against her own. "Because sometimes," she answered softly, "miracles happen when we need them most." That morning, as the sun rose in New York's sky, 3 hearts began to heal old wounds. Emily recovered from her fever, played with her sister on the living room rug. Lucy organized the few belongings they had brought, making grand plans for their new room. And Sarah, sitting on the porch with another cup of tea, gazed at the small garden and allowed herself, for the first time in a long while, to dream about the future. The cabin, which had appeared like a beacon on the darkest night, was beginning to fulfill its promise. It was not just a shelter from the cold or a roof over their heads. It was a second chance, a new beginning, a little miracle hidden on Maple Street. And though Sarah did not know it, somewhere in the city, a man watched discreetly through the window of his Mercedes, a soft smile on his lips as he thought of his late wife and how she would have approved of this small act of redemption. The day went on, bringing with it a series of small discoveries. Emily found a collection of children's books hidden on a low shelf, her eyes shining as she recognized some stories her preschool teacher used to read. Lucy discovered a chest full of art supplies, colored pencils, paper, crayons, and immediately began drawing her new home. Sarah spent the afternoon organizing and cleaning, though the cabin was already spotless. It was a way to keep her hands busy while her mind processed all that was happening. Every drawer she opened, every cabinet she explored, revealed more evidence that someone had carefully planned for their needs. In the basement, besides the emergency supplies, she found boxes of winter clothing, warm coats, boots, gloves, all in sizes that fit the 3 of them perfectly. In the laundry area, a washer and dryer sat waiting to be used, along with detergent and fabric softener. It was as if every basic need they had been forced to ignore for the past 2 years was being met all at once. As the day progressed, Sarah realized that her initial distrust was slowly being replaced by a different feeling. It wasn't just gratitude, though that was certainly there in abundance. It was something deeper, more fundamental, a renewed sense of purpose. Watching her daughters play in the living room, Sarah allowed herself to recall the past 2 years, the nights in shelters, the days roaming the city looking for work, the skipped meals so her daughters could eat, the shame of losing her job, the humiliation of not being able to provide for her children, the constant fear that something worse might happen. But now, sitting in this heated kitchen with the smell of homemade soup, the first she'd cooked in so long, filling the air, Sarah felt something shifting inside her. It was as if the universe was telling her she deserved this second chance, that her efforts to keep her daughters safe and loved, even under the worst circumstances, had not been in vain. Emily, her fever completely gone, helped set the table for dinner, her small hands carefully placing utensils as Sarah had taught her long ago. Lucy had decorated the fridge with her colorful drawings, a yellow house with a smiling sun, 3 figures holding hands in the garden, flowers in every possible color. "Mommy," Lucy called as she stuck yet another drawing onto the fridge. "Can we plant real flowers in the garden, like the ones in my picture?" Sarah looked out the kitchen window at the small patch of yard that seemed ready for gardening. "When spring comes, my love, we'll plant all the flowers you want." It was a dangerous promise, she knew. There was no guarantee they would still be there by spring, but something in her heart told her that this time would be different. That this cabin, which appeared like a miracle on the darkest night, was not just a passing dream. After dinner, while the girls took a bath, a luxury that still made them laugh with joy, Sarah found a blank notebook in a drawer in the living room. She sat at the kitchen table and began to write, recording every detail of this unbelievable day. Maybe one day she could show these pages to her daughters, so they would understand how their lives changed in a single winter night. The hours passed peacefully. Emily and Lucy, clean and warm, asked to sleep together in one bed, still not fully confident in this new reality. Sarah read to them until they fell asleep, their soft breathing sinking into a peaceful rhythm. Later, alone in the living room, Sarah allowed herself to cry once more. They were not tears of despair or fear, as so many had been over the past 2 years. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and renewed hope. The night was clear, and through the living room window, she could see the stars shining over New York. Somewhere out there was someone who cared enough to create this refuge, to give her and her daughters a chance to start over. "Thank you," she whispered to the quiet of the night, her words carrying the weight of 2 years. The small convenience store on the corner of Maple Street looked unremarkable at first glance. Its modest window displays showed everyday items, and a faded sign reading "Joe's Grocery" in letters that had seen better days. Yet for Sarah Johnson, standing at the door on that cold winter morning, the establishment represented far more than just a neighborhood store. It held the possibility of a fresh start. Joe Matthews, the owner for 3 decades, was organizing the canned goods on a shelf when the doorbell softly jingled. He turned to see a young woman, likely in her 30s, holding a resume in visibly trembling hands. "Good morning, Mr. Matthews," Sarah greeted, her voice low but determined. "I'm here about the attendant position." Joe adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses on his nose, studying the woman in front of him. A few days earlier, he had received a mysterious letter specifically addressed to him, recommending Sarah Johnson for the job. The letter came with substantial financial guarantees, an offer to subsidize her wages and benefits, as long as he allowed her flexible hours. "Of course, Ms. Johnson, please come to my office." What Joe called an office was really a tiny cubicle in the back of the store, more like a storage closet than a proper administrative space. Stacks of papers and old records occupied every available surface, leaving only a narrow path to the time-worn desk. "I have 2 small daughters," Sarah began, before Joe could ask any questions. Her hands gripped the resume with renewed force. "Twins, 4 years old. I know that might be a problem with scheduling, but I promise I'm dedicated and a fast learner. I can adapt to any shift as long as—" "Actually," Joe gently interrupted, a sympathetic smile softening his features, "we're specifically looking for someone who can work flexible hours. We have customers at different times of the day, so it would be really helpful to have employees available in various shifts. Sarah blinked, momentarily disconcerted by his response. It was the first time in countless interviews that her status as a single mother didn't seem like an immediate obstacle. I can adapt to any schedule, she repeated, this time with more confidence. As long as I can drop off and pick up my girls from school. They're starting at a preschool nearby. Joe smiled more openly, recalling his own days of raising young children. His wife, who had passed away 5 years ago, always said that raising a family was the most important job anyone could have. That preschool is just 2 blocks away, right? I'm sure we can arrange something that works for everyone. Tell me a bit about your past work experience. The interview flowed naturally after that. Sarah talked about her years as a cleaning lady in a large company, her eye for detail, her ability to work long hours. She did not mention the firing or the 2 years on the streets. Some stories were too heavy for a first conversation. Joe, in turn, explained the job responsibilities: customer service, stocking, basic store upkeep. The pay wasn't extraordinary, but it came with basic benefits and, most importantly, the promise of understanding for her family needs. "When can you start?" he finally asked, after nearly an hour of talking. Sarah felt tears forming at the corners of her eyes, but held them back. Immediately. The next morning, Sarah walked Lucy and Emily to the local preschool for the first time. The colorful building, with children's drawings on the windows and a small playground out front, looked inviting. Even so, the girls clung to her legs, anxiety plain on their small faces. "It'll be all right," Sarah whispered, kneeling to hug her daughters. Her new store uniform, a green t-shirt with the grocery logo, still smelled brand new against her skin. "I'll be working really close by, and you'll make lots of friends here." Their teacher, Mrs. Martinez, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, approached the trio. "Hello, girls. How about you come see our classroom? We have a very special reading corner with comfy cushions and wonderful books." Emily, always the more timid of the two, hid further behind her sister. Lucy, however, her dark eyes shining with a mix of fear and curiosity, took a small step forward. "Do you have adventure books?" she asked in a low but clear voice. "Oh, plenty." "Mrs. Martinez replied excitedly, extending a hand to the little one. "We have stories about pirates, warrior princesses, space explorers. Want to see?" Lucy looked at her mother, seeking approval, and after receiving an encouraging smile, took the teacher's hand. Emily, after a moment of hesitation that seemed to last an eternity, followed her sister's example. Sarah watched her daughters enter the classroom, their little bodies still tense with anxiety, but also carrying that extraordinary resilience only children possess. Silent tears streamed down her face as she watched them disappear through the brightly decorated door. Tears of fear, hopes, and gratitude for this new chance. Her first day at the store was a mix of nerves and determination. Joe proved to be a patient teacher, calmly explaining how the old cash register worked, how to organize the stock, and the opening and closing procedures. "Don't worry about memorizing everything today," he said, noticing her concentrated expression as she tried to absorb every detail. "You'll get the hang of it over time. The most important thing is dealing with customers, and I can see you have a natural talent for that." And he was right. In the days that followed, Sarah not only quickly learned the technical aspects of the job, but also began building relationships with regular customers. Her punctuality was impeccable, her dedication remarkable, and her gentle smile soon became an essential part of the store's atmosphere. The weeks turned into a month, and then 2. Lucy and Emily thrived in preschool, making friends and impressing teachers with their curiosity and enthusiasm. Mrs. Martinez often remarked how despite being identical in appearance, the twins had distinctly complementary personalities. Lucy, the adventurer, always eager for new experiences. Emily, the observer, taking in every detail of the world around her. Sarah organized her new routine with clockwork precision. Wake up at 6 in the morning, make a nutritious breakfast, get the girls ready for school, work her shift at the store, pick up the girls, help with homework, prepare dinner. Every minute was precious, each moment an opportunity to build the life her daughters deserved. Joe watched his new employee with growing admiration. Sarah never complained about rotating shifts, never hesitated to work extra hours when needed, always found ways to improve the store's operations. Her presence brought a new energy to the establishment. "You know," he commented one afternoon, while they closed the store together, "I'm thinking of extending our hours. People in the neighborhood have been asking us to open earlier and close later. We'd need someone to supervise the late afternoon shift." Sarah stopped counting the cash, looking at her boss in surprise. "You're offering me a promotion." "I'm offering an opportunity to someone who has proven their worth," Joe replied with a smile that resembled one he might give a daughter. "The raise would come with it, of course, and we'd keep the flexibility with your girls' schedules." That night, after putting the twins to bed, not without reading 2 stories, as was their tradition, Sarah sat on the porch of the cabin that had become her home. A steaming cup of tea warmed her hands as she gazed at the stars in the New York sky. Lucy and Emily were truly blossoming. Emily, once so withdrawn, was now part of the school's children's choir, her sweet voice joining the others in weekly performances. Lucy had discovered a natural talent for drawing. Her colorful creations decorated not just the fridge at home, but also the walls of the store, where Joe insisted on creating a special art gallery. The routine they had established was more than just survival. It was real, vibrant living. Mornings were filled with laughter over breakfast, afternoons with stories of school and work, nights with quiet moments of gratitude. What Sarah did not know, as she built her new life, was that Michael Williams still watched discreetly from afar. Through regular updates from Joe, he followed Sarah's progress at work. Through contacts at the school, he received updates on the twins' development. Each of their small victories was a confirmation that his silent intervention had been worth it. In his office atop a downtown skyscraper, Michael would sometimes find himself looking out the window toward Maple Street, imagining Sarah serving customers in the store, the girls playing on the school playground. Margaret would have approved, he thought with a melancholy smile. She always said that sometimes all someone needs is a genuine chance. Sarah began implementing small improvements in the store, subtle suggestions Joe welcomed with growing enthusiasm. A reorganization of the shelves to make access easier for elderly customers, a more efficient inventory control system, using a simple but meticulously maintained notebook. A special healthy product section, after noticing the neighborhood's demand for more nutritious options. Joe, impressed by her initiative and practical vision, began entrusting her with increasingly greater responsibilities. "You have a natural eye for business," he commented one day as they reviewed the month's numbers together. "Have you thought about taking some classes? The community center has a continuing education program." The idea planted a seed in Sarah's mind. In her spare hours, usually after the girls had gone to bed, she began studying basic administration, accounting, and marketing. She borrowed books from the local library, stacking them on her nightstand, their pages marked with colorful post-its and notes in the margins. The twins, seeing their mother with books and notebooks spread across the kitchen table each night, naturally followed her example. Lucy began asking for more drawing books, determined to improve her technique. Emily, inspired by Mrs. Martinez, developed a growing love for reading, often asking to visit the library on weekends. "Mommy," Lucy asked one night, while Sarah reviewed her notes on inventory management, "when I grow up, can I have a store like Uncle Joe's?" Sarah smiled, pulling her daughter onto her lap. The affectionate nickname the girls had given Joe warmed her heart. He really had become a father figure to the 3 of them. "You can be whatever you want, my love. The sky's the limit." Emily, playing on the rug with colored pencils, drawing what looked like a classroom, looked up. "I want to be a teacher, like Mrs. Martinez." Their childlike ambitions made Sarah's heart swell with pride and gratitude. Just a few months ago, her daughters barely dared to dream of the next day, too worried about things no child should ever face. Now they were making plans for the future, with the natural confidence of children who feel safe and loved. Work at the store became more than just a job. It was a calling, a purpose. Sarah knew every customer by name, their preferences, their stories. Mrs. Rodriguez came every morning to buy fresh bread and always had a story to share about her grandchildren. Mr. Chen looked for special ingredients for his traditional recipes, occasionally bringing small Chinese sweets for the twins. Young Amy, a college student, stopped for coffee before her evening classes and sometimes stayed to chat about her dreams of becoming a doctor. Joe watched with satisfaction as his store G's, once just another shop in the neighborhood, gradually transformed into a genuine community hub. Sales consistently increased, but more important than that was the sense of familiarity and caring that Sarah helped foster. He said one day while closing the register together, when I got that mysterious letter recommending you, I'll admit I was skeptical, but now I completely understand why someone went out of their way to make sure you got this chance. Sarah froze, her hands hovering over the register. What letter? Joe realized too late that he had said too much. He scratched the back of his neck uncomfortably and tried to downplay it. Oh, it's nothing important, just a recommendation I received. What matters is that you've proven yourself on your own merits. Still, the seed of curiosity had been planted. Sarah began to notice other little details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way everything in her life had fallen neatly into place since they found the cabin. The job with flexible hours so close to home. The school that had accepted the girls in the middle of the semester, without question. It was as if an invisible hand had carefully orchestrated every aspect of her new life. At another time, this realization might have frightened her, but now, with her daughters thriving and her own confidence restored, Sarah felt only deep gratitude for the mystery that had transformed their lives. The seasons changed, and with them, life on Maple Street carried on. The small garden behind the cabin, once just a blank space of possibilities, now flourished with Sarah and the girls' first attempts at gardening. Lucy insisted on planting sunflowers. Because they're happy like us, Mommy. Emily preferred daisies, because they're simple but pretty. One particularly busy afternoon at the store, Sarah served a distinguished gentleman who seemed vaguely familiar. He bought only a newspaper and a bottle of water, but his eyes had a look of recognition that made her wonder if she had seen him before. The customer was Michael Williams, allowing himself, for the first time, a closer look at the life he had helped create. He watched how she interacted with other customers, how she kept things organized even during rush hour, how her smile, though tired, remained genuine. Leaving the store, Michael felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Margaret's passing. His wife always used to say that true charity wasn't just giving people what they needed, but giving them the chance to earn what they wanted on their own. Sarah Johnson had done exactly that. Given the right opportunity, she had not only risen from adversity, but was building something remarkable, not just for herself, but for her daughters and for the entire Maple Street community. That evening, after closing the store and picking the girls up from the tutoring sessions they now attended, Sarah sat on her favorite porch seat. Lucy and Emily played in the small garden, their laughter mingling with the sound of crickets and the distant murmur of the city. The smell of apple pie, her first attempt at baking in years, drifted from the kitchen. Her study books were neatly stacked on the table beside her, waiting for the quiet hours after the girls went to bed. In his office downtown, Michael Williams also gazed up at the same star-filled sky. The reports on his desk indicated that Joe's Grocery was having its best year in decades. The twins' school evaluations showed remarkable progress in every area, but it wasn't the numbers that made him smile. It was the certainty that Margaret would be proud, not just of the help he had given, but of the way Sarah had turned that help into something greater than herself. Night moved on in New York, wrapping the city in its dark mantle. In the little cabin on Maple Street, a family was finding its way back to life. At Joe's Grocery, a community rediscovered the meaning of neighborliness. And somewhere between heaven and earth, silent miracles continued to happen, one day at a time. Dawn light filtered through the windows of Joe's Grocery when Sarah received the news. She was organizing the shelves, as she did every morning, when Joe called her to his little office in the back of the store. "Sarah," he began, fumbling with some papers on his worn desk, "you've been more than an employee these past months. Sales have gone up 30% since you arrived, and customers, well, They come to the store specifically during your shifts. Sarah felt her heart race. Her hands, calloused from constant work, gripped the green apron of her uniform. Starting today, you're officially the assistant manager, Joe announced, handing her an envelope, with a raise and benefits included. Tears came instantly, blurring her vision. Mr. Matthews, Joe, he gently corrected. I think it's past time you just called me Joe. Outside the office, the first customers of the day were beginning to arrive. Sarah could hear the familiar jingle of the doorbell, the friendly voices of the regulars. Her world, once so small and frightening, had expanded to include this entire community. At home, changes were equally notable. Lucy and Emily, now with healthy color in their cheeks and a sparkle in their eyes, had flourished like flowers in spring. Breakfast was no longer a rushed meal with whatever was available. It was now a family ritual, with cereal, fruit, and the occasional weekend pancakes. "Mommy," Lucy asked one morning, while drawing in her new sketchbook, "can we have a birthday party this year?" Sarah, preparing the girls' lunch for school, paused for a moment. The last birthday the twins had celebrated was marked by a single cupcake split 3 ways on a park bench. The memory still hurt. "Of course we can, my love," she replied, her voice firm with the certainty that she could now provide these simple joys for her daughters. "We'll make it the best party you've ever had." Emily, who was playing with her building blocks on the living room rug, looked up with interest. "Can we have chocolate cake?" "With strawberry frosting," Sarah promised, smiling as she watched their faces light up at the thought. Across the city, in his skyscraper office, Michael Williams received his weekly report on the Johnson family. It was a discreet folder containing updates on the twins' academic performance, Sarah's progress at the store, and the occasional photograph taken from a distance. "The girls are doing exceptionally well in school," his assistant noted, pointing to the latest evaluations. "And Mrs. Johnson just got a promotion at the grocery." Michael flipped through the documents carefully, his eyes lingering on a recent photo. Sarah was in the cabin's garden with the twins, all 3 laughing as they planted flowers. It was an image that starkly contrasted with the one of her sleeping on a park bench with her daughters. "Margaret would be proud," he murmured to himself, gently touching the wedding band he still wore. His late wife had always insisted that everyone deserved a second chance. Someone just had to believe in them. At the store, Sarah continued to make small changes that had a big impact. She rearranged the shelves for easier access for elderly customers, created a healthy product section that quickly became popular, and set up a delivery system for residents who couldn't easily get around. "You have a mind for business," Joe commented one day, watching her patiently explain the benefits of different teas to an elderly customer. "Ever thought of taking some courses?" The idea planted itself again in her mind. During the quiet hours after her daughters fell asleep, Sarah continued to study. Books on basic administration, accounting, and marketing, subjects that once seemed out of reach, now lay open on her table. The twins, seeing their mother study every night, naturally followed her lead. Lucy honed her artistic talent with growing dedication, her increasingly elaborate drawings decorating not only their fridge, but also a special mural Joe created in the store. Emily, more introspective, discovered a love for reading, devouring books at a pace that surprised even her teacher. One particularly busy afternoon at the store, Sarah served a customer who seemed vaguely familiar. He was a distinguished gentleman with grey hair and an impeccable suit, who bought only a newspaper and a bottle of water. His eyes had a gleam of recognition that intrigued her, but before she could think too much about it, he had already left. Sarah had no idea that this man was Michael Williams, allowing himself a closer look at the life he had helped transform. He watched how she interacted with customers, how she kept things organized despite the rush, how her smile remained genuine despite evident fatigue. Leaving the store, Michael felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Margaret's death. "You were right, my love," he murmured, looking at the sky. "Sometimes all someone needs is a chance." The months passed, bringing more positive changes. Sarah not only kept her bills up to date, but she managed to save a little each month. The twins had new winter clothes, quality school supplies, and even a few toys, simple luxuries that once felt impossible. The girl's birthday was celebrated with a modest but joyful party in the cabin's backyard. Joe and a few regular customers came, bringing gifts and smiles. There was a chocolate cake with strawberry frosting, just as Emily had asked, and colorful balloons that Lucy insisted on keeping even after they deflated. Michael observed the celebration from afar, his heart warmed by the scene. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the family's material circumstances, but in something deeper. There was a new confidence in Sarah's demeanor, a genuine joy in the girl's laughter, a sense of belonging that hadn't been there before. That night, after the last candles were blown out and the final guests had left, Sarah sat on the cabin's porch. Lucy and Emily slept deeply, tired but happy after a day of celebration. The starry New York sky shone above her, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah allowed herself to dream about the future without fear. In his office, Michael placed the report folder into a special drawer. The photographs, school reports, and store updates all told the story of a successful fresh start. But the true miracle, he knew, wasn't in the numbers or the documents. It was in the resilience of a mother determined to provide a better future for her daughters, in the human capacity to rise when given a chance. Night moved on in New York, covering the city with its starry mantle. In the small cabin on Maple Street, 3 hearts beat in peace, their dreams no longer haunted by the uncertainty of tomorrow. And somewhere between heaven and earth, Margaret Williams smiled, knowing her husband had finally understood the true nature of compassion. Spring arrived in New York in an explosion of color and promise. Sarah woke early one Saturday morning, the sun barely starting to gild the horizon, and looked out the small backyard window in the kitchen. The space, once empty and lifeless, now called to her with endless possibilities. "Mommy!" Lucy appeared beside her, still in pajamas, her eyes sleepy but curious. "What are you looking at?" Sarah smiled, running her fingers through her daughter's dark hair. "I was thinking of making a garden. What do you think?" Lucy's eyes widened with excitement. "Can we plant flowers?" "And strawberries. Emily loves strawberries." As if called by her name, Emily appeared in the kitchen, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Who said strawberries? Breakfast that morning turned into an impromptu planning session. Around the kitchen table, between bowls of cereal and glasses of orange juice, they all sketched out their dreams for the garden. Lucy wanted a rainbow of flowers. Emily, more practical, insisted on vegetables and fruit they could eat. "We can have both," Sarah assured them, her heart warming at her daughter's enthusiasm. "We just need to learn how to make everything grow." That afternoon, returning from the store with a few basic seed packets, the only ones she could afford, Sarah found a surprise on her porch. A gardening toolbox, seemingly new but deliberately dirtied to look used, sat carefully placed by the door. Inside were a variety of high-quality seeds, essential tools, and a detailed guide to urban gardening. What Sarah didn't know was that Michael Williams had personally chosen each item in that box. He had spent hours in a specialized gardening shop, consulting experts on the best options for beginners. Margaret loved gardening, and he found himself picking some of her favorite flowers, daisies, lavender, sunflowers. The twins were ecstatic about their gift from fate, as Lucy called it. Emily was already leafing through the manual with interest, while Lucy organized the seeds by color. Work began the next day. Sarah discovered that the soil had already been prepared beforehand, another careful precaution Michael had taken when he had the cabin built. The earth was rich and ready for planting, and a basic irrigation system had been installed. "First, we need to prepare the beds," Sarah explained, reading from the manual. The girls, dressed in old overalls and straw hats found in the basement, listened intently. The entire weekend was devoted to the project. Neighbors passing by stopped to watch and offer advice. Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived 2 houses down, brought tomato seedlings from her own garden. Mr. Chen, a regular customer at the store, showed up with seeds of Asian vegetables and detailed instructions in his heavily accented English. Lucy and Emily soaked up every moment with childlike enthusiasm. They learned the differences between seeds, how to measure the right depth to plant them, the importance of water and sunlight. Sarah turned each task into a lesson, math as they measured distances between plants, science as she explained photosynthesis, responsibility as they established watering schedules. Weeks passed, and the first sprouts appeared. The girls' excitement was contagious. Every morning began with a careful inspection of the garden, checking the progress of each plant. Emily kept a detailed journal, sketching and measuring the growth of the seedlings. Lucy created colorful labels to identify each species. In his secret visits, Michael watched from a distance as everything transformed. Not just the garden, which thrived under the family's dedicated care, but the people themselves. Sarah looked stronger, more grounded. The twins, once so cautious about the world, now ran freely through the yard, their laughter echoing in the neighborhood. One day, while discreetly overseeing the delivery of more gardening supplies, accidentally left at the wrong address, Michael noticed something that made him smile. In the middle of the garden, growing strong and determined, was a sunflower. It had been Margaret's favorite flower, and seeing it there turned toward the sun like a symbol of hope felt like a sign. The garden soon became more than a family project. It turned into the heart of the neighborhood. Other children began to wander over, curious about the plants and drawn by the twins' laughter. Sarah, noticing the opportunity, started hosting small gardening lessons on Saturdays. Every seed has a story, she explained to the group of kids sitting in a circle on the grass, and each one needs care, patience, and love to grow. Lucy and Emily thrived on the new friendships. Tommy, the shy boy from next door, revealed himself to be an expert at identifying beneficial insects for the garden. Maria, Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, brought traditional recipes from her grandmother to use the herbs that were sprouting. As summer advanced, the garden exploded with color and life. Mrs. Rodriguez's tomatoes hung red and juicy. Mr. Chen's aromatic herbs perfumed the air. Flowers of every hue and size attracted butterflies and hummingbirds, transforming the little space into an urban oasis. Sarah began incorporating produce from the garden into their meals. The twins, once reluctant about vegetables, now proudly ate what they had helped grow. Every meal became a celebration of the garden's achievements. "Mommy," Emily commented one evening as they enjoyed a salad with fresh tomatoes from the yard, "I think I want to be a botanist when I grow up." Lucy, not wanting to be left out, declared, "And I'll be an artist and paint all the flowers in the world." Sarah smiled, watching her daughters. Like the plants in the garden, they had found firm roots and were now growing toward the sun, each in her own unique way. The garden's success did not go unnoticed at the store. Joe, impressed with the fresh produce Sarah occasionally brought in, suggested she start selling the surplus. "Organic products are trending," he argued, "and our customers would love something grown right here in the neighborhood." Thus a new project was born. Sarah began carefully packaging her produce in small bundles, each with a hand-drawn label by Lucy. Emily, with her natural precision, took charge of weighing and recording every item. Michael, on one of his discreet visits to the store, couldn't hide his smile upon seeing the small Johnson Garden produce section near the cash register. He bought a package of cherry tomatoes, knowing they were the same kind Margaret used to grow in her own garden. Autumn arrived gently, bringing new challenges and lessons. Sarah and the girls learned about seasonal crops, about preparing the garden for winter, about nature's eternal cycle. "It's like life, isn't it?" Lucy observed one day as they helped some plants ready for the cold. "Some things end, but others are just beginning." Sarah hugged her daughter, marveling at the wisdom that could come from someone so small. "Exactly, my love." The garden had become more than a weekend project. It was a living metaphor of their own journey. Like the plants they cultivated, they had found fertile soil to grow, support to strengthen, and light to help them flourish. In his office, Michael kept a special folder of photographs documenting the garden's progress. Captured discreetly, the images showed its transformation, from empty ground to the first beds, from tiny sprouts to summer's explosion of color, from the girls' early friendships to neighborhood gatherings in the yard. One photo in particular caught his attention. Sarah and the twins, their backs to the camera, admiring their tallest sunflower at sunset. The flower, majestic in its simplicity, seemed to bless the family with its golden presence. "You were right about the little miracles, Margaret," he murmured, gently touching the photo. "They happen every day, if we know where to plant the seeds." The garden continued to grow and evolve, just like its caretakers. Sarah discovered she could be both strong and gentle, like the plants she nurtured. Lucy learned that beauty came in many forms, just like the different flowers she painted in her sketchbook. Emily understood that some of the best things in life take time, like the seeds she patiently watched sprout. And Michael, in his secret visits, saw something that warmed his lonely heart. He saw hope growing in fertile ground, love flourishing where no one thought it could, miracles sprouting from the smallest seeds of kindness. The cabin, once so silent, now overflowed with life. Children's laughter echoed across the yard, the aroma of fresh herbs filled the kitchen, and 3 hearts beat in harmony with the rhythm of nature. It was more than just a garden. It was a testament to the transforming power of love, perseverance, and faith in tomorrow. And somewhere Margaret Williams smiled, knowing that her husband had finally understood her most precious lesson, that the greatest miracles begin with the smallest acts of kindness. Night fell over New York under a mantle of dark clouds. Michael Williams remained in his car for several long minutes, observing the welcoming lights of the little cabin on Maple Street. James, his driver for decades, waited in respectful silence. "Are you sure about this, sir?" James finally asked, his eyes meeting Michael's in the rear-view mirror. Michael adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture that didn't match his usual composure. "It's time, James. They deserve to know the truth." The wind began to blow harder as Michael climbed the steps to the porch. Through the window, he could see Sarah helping the twins with their homework at the kitchen table. The domestic scene, so different from the nights he used to watch them sleep on a park bench, made his heart tighten. His knock at the door was soft, almost hesitant. For a moment he thought about turning back, about keeping the mystery that had served everyone so well. But then he heard footsteps approaching. Sarah opened the door, a welcoming smile on her face that immediately turned to shock. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hand gripped the doorknob so tightly that her knuckles went white. "Mr. Williams," she whispered. "Good evening, Sarah," he replied gently. "May we talk?" A distant rumble of thunder echoed, as though the sky itself was responding to the tension of the moment. Lucy and Emily, curious about the nighttime visitor, peeked from the kitchen. "Girls," Sarah called, her voice trembling slightly, "go to your room, please." "But Mommy," Lucy began to protest. "Now." The twins, sensing their mother's serious tone, reluctantly obeyed. Sarah turned her attention back to Michael, her eyes now hard with a mix of fear and distrust. "What are you doing here?" "I came to explain everything." Michael took a step forward, stopping when Sarah instinctively stepped back. "Please, Sarah. You deserve to know the truth." A flash of lightning lit the sky, immediately followed by a deafening thunder. The first drops of rain began to fall, heavy and cold. Sarah hesitated for a long moment before opening the door wider. "Come in, but if you try anything—" "I didn't come to cause trouble," Michael assured her, stepping into the house he had built for her. "I came to fix past mistakes." The storm intensified quickly outside, the wind howling through the trees. Sarah led Michael to the living room, keeping a safe distance between them. "Mommy?" Emily's voice came from the hallway. "It's thundering really loud." Sarah glanced at the window, seeing the storm's growing ferocity. "Let's all go down to the basement," she decided. "It's safer there." The basement was cozy and well-equipped, another detail Michael had carefully planned. The girls settled on a sofa in the corner, clinging to each other and watching the adults with wide eyes. "Now," Sarah said, sitting on a chair opposite Michael. "Explain." Michael took a deep breath, his hands clasped over his knees. "It all began on an autumn morning, a few months ago. I was on my way to the office when I saw you and the girls sleeping on a bench in Central Park." Sarah visibly stiffened, her hands gripping the chair's arms. "The guilt consumed me," Michael continued. "I remembered the day I signed your dismissal. The justifications I gave myself about company policies and exceptions that couldn't be made." "You don't know," Sarah interrupted, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "You have no idea what we went through after that day." "Then tell me," Michael gently urged. "I want to know everything." Thunder rumbled above them, but now it seemed distant, as if time itself had slowed for this moment. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. When she opened them again, they were filled with unshed tears. In the beginning, I thought I'd find another job quickly. I had good references, experience. But with 2 little kids, nobody wanted to take the risk. The jobs I did find lasted only until the first time one of the girls got sick. Her voice faltered, but she continued. My savings ran out in 3 months. The apartment was next. I tried shelters, but there was never room for all of us together, and I couldn't be separated from my daughters. Lucy and Emily, on the sofa, hugged each other tighter. They remembered, even though they were so small, the cold nights and days of hunger. Do you know what it's like to see your children crying from hunger and not be able to do anything? Sarah asked, tears now streaming down her face. Do you know what it's like to give them your own food and still not have enough? To sleep on park benches, praying no one hurts you during the night? Michael felt his own tears begin to fall. Sarah, No, she cut him off. You don't know. You weren't there when Emily got pneumonia and I had to beg at hospitals. You weren't there when Lucy cried, asking why we couldn't go home. You weren't there on the nights I held my daughters, promising everything would be all right, even though I knew it was a lie. The storm raged outside, but in the basement, the silence was deafening after Sarah's words. I watched you, Michael finally admitted. For weeks I followed your routine. I saw how, even in the worst circumstances, you kept the girls clean, took them to the library, tried to keep some normalcy in their lives. And only then did you decide to help. The bitterness in Sarah's voice was palpable. Michael shook his head. No. I decided to help immediately. But I wanted to do it right. Not just hand over money or a place to stay. I wanted to give you a real chance to start over. He gestured around them. This cabin, every detail was planned for you. The job at the grocery, the spots at school. It was all arranged so you could have autonomy, not just charity. Sarah looked around the basement with new eyes. The shelves of emergency supplies, the small generator, the extra blankets, every element so carefully considered. Why? She finally asked. Why do all of this in secret? Michael was quiet for a moment, his hands trembling slightly. My wife, Margaret. She always said that real charity isn't about the giver. It's about who receives. She ran an assistance fund for employees in trouble. When she died, I let it all go, focused on the numbers, the policies. His voice broke. Seeing you and the girls on that bench, it was like Margaret was showing me all my mistakes at once. It wasn't just about fixing a specific mistake. It was about honoring what she always stood for. Lucy, who had been listening intently, got up from the sofa and walked over to Michael. With a child's innocence, she took his hand. Are you our guardian angel? Michael let out a tearful laugh. No, sweetheart. Just someone trying to fix his mistakes. Emily joined her sister. Mrs. Margaret must be proud. Sarah watched the scene, her feelings in turmoil. Anger, gratitude, hurt, relief. They all blended in her chest. For 2 years, she said softly, I hated you and your family. I hated how much money you had while my daughters went hungry. I hated every time I passed one of your buildings while looking for a safe place to sleep. She took a deep breath. But now I don't know what to feel. You owe me nothing, Michael replied. Not gratitude or forgiveness. What I did was an attempt to fix a mistake that should never have happened. The storm began to subside outside, its thunder now more distant. What happens now? Sarah asked. That's up to you, Michael answered. The cabin is yours. The deed is ready to be transferred. The job at the grocery is the result of your own hard work. You've built a life here, Sarah. A life that's rightfully yours. Lucy and Emily returned to their mother, nestling into her arms. And you? Sarah questioned. Will you just disappear? Michael smiled sadly. Only if you want me to, but it would be an honor to get to know you all better, to be part of your lives in a more direct way. Sarah looked at her daughters, seeing in them the future she had fought so hard to build. A future that, ironically, had only been made possible by the man who had once destroyed her world. Maybe, she said finally. We can start over, not as boss and employee, not as benefactor and beneficiary, just as people. Michael nodded, emotion showing in his eyes. I would like that very much. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, renewed silence. In the cabin's basement, 4 people began writing a new story. A story of redemption, forgiveness, and second chances. Lucy, always the most expressive of the twins, broke the solemn moment. Can we show Mr. Williams our garden? We have sunflowers. Sarah couldn't help a small smile. It's dark now, sweetheart. But maybe he can come back another day to see. The sunflowers, Michael murmured gently, were Margaret's favorite flowers. I know, Sarah answered, surprising herself. Somehow, I always knew there was something special about that first seed we found. The twins began to yawn, the night's drama finally taking its toll. Sarah stood, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. It's getting late, she said. The girls need to sleep. Michael also rose, reading the cue. Of course. Can I come back another day? To see the sunflowers? Sarah hesitated only a moment before nodding. Sunday. We make a special lunch on Sundays. It was more than an invitation to a meal. It was an offer of peace, a first step toward something new. As Michael climbed the basement stairs, followed by Sarah and the girls, the air felt lighter, as it always does after a big storm. There were no guarantees it would be easy, that the hurts of the past would completely vanish. But there was hope. On the porch, before leaving, Michael paused for a moment. Sarah? Yes. Margaret used to say the greatest miracles start with the smallest acts of kindness, but I think she was partly wrong. The real miracles start with people like you, people who, even in the worst circumstances, never lose their humanity. Sarah did not reply, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. The twins, half asleep in her arms, murmured their goodbyes. Michael descended the porch steps and walked to his car, where James was still patiently waiting. The sky had cleared, and a few stars were beginning to appear among the dissipating clouds. Somewhere, he was sure, Margaret was smiling. The morning light revealed the storm's damage from the previous night. Sarah stood forlornly, staring at the cabin's damaged roof, the torn gutters, and the debris scattered across the garden she and the girls had so carefully nurtured. The once majestic sunflowers lay bent by the wind's force. Michael had left the night before with a promise to arrange repairs immediately. It was still early when a pickup truck parked in front of the house. Sarah, busy trying to salvage what she could from the garden, barely looked up when she heard footsteps approaching. Sarah? That voice. A voice she hadn't heard in 5 years, that haunted her nightmares, that belonged to the man who had left her without knowing she was carrying 2 lives in her womb. David, she whispered, her face draining of color. David Martinez stood still, his eyes locked on the woman he had once loved. He looked older, more weathered by time, but still possessed that intense gaze that once made her believe in empty promises. I came to do the repairs, he stammered. Mr. Williams hired me. But I didn't know. I never imagined. The sound of childish laughter interrupted them. Lucy and Emily ran out of the house, eager to see what had become of the garden after the storm. David staggered as though he had been punched. His eyes scanned the faces of the girls, perfect copies of each other, with dark hair and expressive eyes. His eyes, his smile. Are they mine? He whispered, his voice breaking. Instinctively, Sarah placed herself between him and the girls. Lucy, Emily, go inside. But Mommy, Lucy began to protest. Now, the twins, sensing the tension, reluctantly obeyed. David remained paralyzed, his eyes fixed on the door through which his daughters, had disappeared. You didn't know, Sarah said finally, not as a question but as a bitter statement. How could I? His voice trembled. His voice. Why didn't you ever tell me? Tell you? Sarah let out a humorless laugh. You disappeared, David. Vanished in the middle of the night with all your promises of eternal love. How could I tell you anything? The silence that followed was heavy with 5 years of unsaid words, missed moments, unwitnessed first steps. "They have a father," David murmured, more to himself than to Sarah. "My daughters have grown up without a father." "They have me," Sarah answered firmly, "and that's been enough." David took a step forward, stopping when Sarah stepped back. "Let me know them, please. I know I don't deserve it, but they deserve to know they have a father." Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. "Do you know what they deserve? They deserve not to have been abandoned before they were even born. They deserve not to have gone hungry and cold on the streets because I couldn't support them alone. They deserve so much more than you or I could ever give them." The pain on David's face was palpable. On the streets. "Sarah, what happened?" So Sarah told him about discovering her pregnancy too late, about the lost jobs, the nights on park benches, told him about Michael Williams and the second chance that had changed their lives. And as she spoke, she saw the horror grow in the eyes of the man she had once loved. Inside the house, Lucy and Emily peeked through the window, confused by the scene unfolding in the garden. "Who is he, Lucy?" Emily whispered. "I don't know," Lucy replied, "but Mommy is crying." David listened to every word, every detail of the struggle Sarah had faced alone. When she finished, he was openly crying. "Let me fix this," he begged. "I can't change the past, but I can be here now. I can be the father they deserve." "And if you disappear again?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "How can I trust you won't leave when things get tough?" "Because now I know what I stand to lose," he answered simply. The silence was broken by the creak of the door. Lucy and Emily, unable to contain their curiosity any longer, had ventured back into the garden. "Mommy," Lucy called, her small hand seeking her mother's. "Why are you crying?" Sarah looked at her daughters, then at David, seeing in his features the same shock of recognition the girls had yet to understand. How to explain? How to tell 2 5-year-olds that the stranger in their yard was the father they had never known? "Girls," she began, her voice trembling, This is... "I'm David," he cut in softly, kneeling to their level. "And I'm your dad." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy and Emily looked to their mother for confirmation, confusion and fear mingling in their identical faces. "Dad?" Emily whispered, the words sounding strange on her tongue. "Like at school when Tommy talks about his dad." David swallowed hard, tears rolling unchecked down his cheeks. "Yes, just like that." "But where were you?" Lucy asked, her small voice laden with a hurt she couldn't fully understand. "Why did you never come to see us?" "Because I made a terrible mistake," David answered honestly. "The biggest mistake of my life. I left before I knew you existed, and I lost so much." Sarah watched them interact, her heart in pieces, as her daughters processed a truth that would forever change their lives. Emily, ever cautious, clung to her leg. Lucy, however, took a hesitant step toward David. "Are you going to leave again?" The question, so simple yet devastating, made David sob. "No, my little one. Never again. If you'll let me, I want to know you. I want to be the dad I should have been from the start." The sound of another car approaching broke the moment. Michael Williams stepped out of his Mercedes, stopping abruptly at the scene before him. "Sarah," he called, concern evident in his voice, "is everything all right?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Not yet." The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. David worked tirelessly repairing the house, each hammer strike seeming like an attempt to build a bridge over the chasm of 5 years' absence. The twins, at first hesitant, began asking questions. They wanted to know everything about him, where he lived, what he did, why his eyes looked like theirs. David answered each inquiry with endless patience, knowing each answer was a small brick in the foundation he was trying to build. Sarah watched it all with a mix of fear and hope. She saw how Lucy ran to show David her drawings, how Emily timidly started reading stories to him during his work breaks. She also saw how he drank in every moment with hungry eyes, as though trying to make up for all the lost years in every small gesture. Michael, for his part, remained present but discreet, offering silent support when needed. He was the one who suggested David join them for Sunday lunches, the one who arranged legal documents to establish paternity officially. One night, after the girls were in bed, Sarah found David on the porch, gazing at the stars. "They're extraordinary," he said quietly. "Just like you, Sarah. You did an amazing job." "I had no choice," she replied. "They were all I had." "I'm sorry," he whispered, words he had repeated hundreds of times in the last few weeks. "If I could go back." "But you can't," Sarah said, finishing his sentence. "None of us can. We can only move forward." David nodded, wiping away tears. Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" Sarah looked up at the window of the twins' room, where a soft light still glowed. "They're kids, David. Their hearts are still pure enough to forgive. The question is, can you forgive yourself?" The rebuilding wasn't just of the house. It was of trust, relationships, the family that never had a chance to exist. Each day brought new challenges, new discoveries, new wounds to heal. Lucy began calling David Dad first, the word hesitant yet full of hope. Emily took longer, preferring to call him by his name, testing the waters with her characteristic caution. Sarah observed each interaction with a tightness in her chest, reliving her own memories of growing up without a father, vowing her daughters would have a different story, even if it meant opening her heart to forgiveness. Michael remained a constant presence, a silent reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected directions. He was the one who, noticing the tension at family meals, suggested starting small: ice cream after school, an afternoon in the park. The house was rebuilt little by little, each repair a metaphor for the healing that took place inside it. A new roof, stronger than before, freshly painted walls covering old scars. The garden, replanted with care, showing new sprouts. One morning, while everyone worked in the garden, Lucy and Emily helping David plant new sunflowers, while Sarah and Michael tidied the beds, Emily asked the question that had hovered in the air for weeks: "Can we have a real dad?" The silence that followed was broken by Michael's gentle smile. "Of course you can, sweetheart. The heart has endless room for love." David looked at Michael with gratitude in his eyes, realizing for the first time that he was not competing for love. He was simply adding to what was already there. Sarah watched the scene with tear-filled eyes, her daughters, playing in the garden with the father they had finally met. Michael, the guardian angel who transformed their lives. And herself, stronger, wiser, more capable of forgiving. The sun shone on them, promising a new day, a new beginning. The storm had passed, leaving behind not just destruction, but also the chance to rebuild something stronger, more genuine. And in the newly planted garden, the sunflowers began to grow again. Their faces turned to the sun, as though they knew that after every dark night, dawn always comes. Spring sunshine bathed the cabin on Maple Street in a golden, promising light. A year had passed since the stormy night that had changed everything, and the transformation was visible in every detail. The garden, more lush than ever, burst with color. Majestic sunflowers raised their faces to the sky, roses perfumed the air, and a thriving vegetable patch provided food not just for the family, but for anyone in need. Sarah stood in the kitchen, making coffee as she watched through the window the scene unfolding in the yard. David pushed Lucy and Emily on a swing he had built with his own hands, each laugh from the girls ringing out like music. Michael, dressed casually, unthinkable a year ago, was pruning the shrubs with meticulous care, pausing occasionally to smile at his granddaughters. "Hiya, Dad," Lucy shouted, her dark hair flying in the wind. "I want to touch the sky." "Grandpa Michael, are you watching how high I'm going?" Emily added, her small legs pumping the air in pure joy. Sarah smiled, remembering how those words, Dad and Grandpa, had gradually found their places in their lives. Time, that great teacher, had softened edges that once seemed impossible to smooth. Where there had been hurt, there was now understanding. Where there had been pain, there was now love. The doorbell rang, announcing the first visitors of the day. Sarah adjusted the badge she now wore proudly. Coordinator, Second Chances Project. It was more than a title, it was a symbol of how life could take surprising turns. Maria Rodriguez entered timidly, carrying her 2-month-old baby in her arms. Behind her came Anna, Christine, and Sophia, all carrying not just their bags, but stories of struggle echoing Sarah's own path. The cabin's living room, which once witnessed so many tears of despair, now served as the meeting point for the social project that had grown out of their story. "Welcome," Sarah greeted them with a smile born in the depths of her soul. "Shall we begin?" The Second Chances project had been launched 3 months after the storm that brought Michael and David under the same roof. Deeply moved by the transformation he'd seen, Michael decided it was time to expand Margaret's legacy in a way she would have wholeheartedly approved. The idea was at once simple and revolutionary. Create a comprehensive support network for single mothers, offering not just financial aid, something Michael could easily provide, but primarily the tools for true, lasting reconstruction. Sarah had been the natural choice to coordinate. Her story, from losing her job to rebuilding her life, from tragedy to triumph, served as a living testimony that real change was possible. More than that, her experience allowed her to see beyond immediate needs, understanding the emotional and practical challenges each mother faced. "When I lost my job," Maria shared with the group, rocking her infant, "I thought it was the end of the world. I had just found out I was pregnant. The baby's father had disappeared. I felt so alone. But then I met Sarah, saw this house, met her daughters, and something inside me changed. I realized there's always hope, even when it seems impossible." The weekly meetings in the cabin had become far more than mere support sessions. It was a sacred space where women could share not only their pain, but also their victories. Every small triumph was celebrated as a collective achievement. A new job, a completed course, a small home business started. Outside, David had joined Michael in the garden, leaving the girls to play with their dolls under the shade of the young oak they had planted together months before. The two men, who once saw each other as rivals for the girls' affection, had developed an unlikely but deep friendship. "I can never thank you enough," David said quietly, helping trim a hedge, "for taking care of them when I failed so terribly." Michael paused his work, watching the girls, who had abandoned their dolls to chase butterflies. "You know, David, I spent 60 years thinking I understood business, understood life. I had to lose Margaret to start learning what really matters. And even then, I almost missed the chance to make a difference in Sarah and the girls' lives." "What was Margaret like?" David asked, noticing how her name always brought a special sparkle to Michael's eyes. Michael smiled, lost in memories. "She was pure light. She could see the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. This project, she would have loved it. She probably would have thought of it long before I did." Inside the house, the meeting continued. Sarah handed out enrollment forms for various professional courses, a partnership Michael had established with local institutions. Each woman there had a personalized development plan based on her own abilities, dreams, and circumstances. "When I first came here," Anna shared, nervously gripping a cup of coffee, "I could hardly look anyone in the eye. I was so ashamed of my situation, so afraid of being judged, but you all showed me that there's no shame in starting over, that each of us has a strength we never imagined." Sarah understood that feeling intimately. She remembered her own dark nights, silent tears after her daughters were asleep, the crushing weight of responsibility. But now, looking at the women gathered in her living room, she saw reflections not of defeat, but of resilience. The sound of children's laughter drifted in through the open window, mingling with the voices of the women sharing their stories. It was a symphony of hope, a melody Sarah never imagined she'd hear again during her darkest days. That afternoon, after the official meeting had ended, Michael gathered everyone in the garden for a special announcement. Sarah, David, the twins, and even some of the project participants who had stayed to help clean up, formed a circle under the bright spring sky. "A year ago," Michael began, his voice heavy with memories, "a storm brought us all together in this cabin. That night, truths were revealed, wounds were exposed, and healing began. Today, I want to formalize something that in my heart has been decided for a long time." He took an envelope from his blazer pocket, his hands trembling slightly as he handed it to Sarah. Inside was not just the deed to the cabin in her name, but also documents establishing a permanent fund for the Second Chances project. Margaret, he continued, his voice breaking, always said true charity isn't about giving people what they need, but about giving them the tools to earn what they want. Sarah, you haven't just built your own path, you're paving the way for others to follow. Tears ran freely down Sarah's face as she hugged the man who once represented everything that had gone wrong in her life, and who now symbolized a second chance she never imagined possible. Lucy and Emily, sensing the emotion of the moment, even if they didn't fully grasp it, rushed to join the hug. David, still amazed by the miracle he had regained in his life, completed the family circle. "Grandpa," Lucy asked, her sweet voice filled with childlike wisdom, "do you think Grandma Margaret can see us from heaven?" Michael swallowed hard, looking at the sky where white clouds drifted lazily. "I'm sure she can, sweetheart. And I'm sure she's very proud of all of us." The cabin had become far more than a simple refuge. It was a home, a sanctuary, a beacon of hope for everyone who walked through its doors. Its walls, which once saw so many tears of despair, now echoed with joyful laughter. Its garden, which started with a few tentative seeds, now fed not just bodies but souls. Sarah looked around, her daughters playing freely, David finding redemption in late fatherhood, Michael filling the role of grandfather with a dedication that made up for lost time. She saw the women from the project, each carrying her own story of struggle and hope, each finding her way into the light. That night, after everyone had left and the girls slept peacefully in their beds, Sarah sat in her favorite spot on the porch. The scent of sunflowers filled the night air, and the stars seemed to shine with special clarity. David joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. They sat in silence for a moment, simply absorbing the peace of the evening. "What are you thinking about?" he finally asked. "Paths," she replied softly. "How sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely to find the right direction. How what seems like a tragedy can be just the start of something extraordinary." Michael, passing by to say goodnight, stopped to listen. The soft porch light illuminated his face, where a serene smile had replaced the stern expression of old. "You know," Sarah continued, holding her cup in both hands, "for a long time, I thought getting fired was the worst thing that could ever have happened to me. I hated you, Michael, hated your company, hated the entire world. But now I see it was just the beginning of a journey I needed to take. To the place you were meant to be," Michael added, remembering Margaret's frequent words. "Exactly," Sarah smiled. "To the place we were all meant to be." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled only by the nighttime sounds of the garden and the quiet breathing of the city. 3 people, whose lives had improbably intertwined, united by a simple but profound truth, that forgiveness has the power to transform even the hardest stories into miracles. In the years to come, the cabin on Maple Street would continue its sacred mission. More mothers would find hope within its welcoming walls, more gardens would flourish under determined hands. More stories of redemption would be written in its invisible pages. Lucy and Emily would grow strong and confident, knowing they were loved not just by their mother, but by a father who had found his way back, and a grandfather who had proven it was never too late to do the right thing. The Second Chances project would expand, touching more lives, transforming more stories. Sarah would discover that her own journey of pain had become a powerful tool to help other women find their way. And somewhere, Margaret Williams smiled, knowing that her legacy of love and compassion lived on, blooming like the sunflowers in the garden, forever turned toward the light. The cabin on Maple Street would remain a silent testimony that the greatest miracles often begin in the darkest moments, and that true, deep, transformative forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. It was more than a story of redemption. It was a reminder that sometimes the most winding paths lead us exactly where we need to be, and that love, in all its forms, has the power to transform not only hearts but entire lives. In the garden, the sunflowers would continue to grow, their faces always turned to the sun, an eternal symbol of hope, forgiveness, and new beginnings. And within the cabin walls, the stories of every life touched by this small miracle on Maple Street would echo forever.